Michigan is a 3.5 point favorite, I believe. Could be changing every day. Here's a couple of interesting trends that work both for and against Michigan, or I should say both for Michigan and for Ohio State. Michigan has covered 8 straight games as a home favorite of under 17 points, while Ohio State has covered 9 straight games when they're dogs of 3 or more points. So that looks like that might be colliding in this matchup, which makes sense. Why not? Put it all on the line. Uh, and I don't think we really need the trends in this game because we really don't know what's going to happen. We kind of got the feeling after a while what would happen after the way Ohio State was dominating the series. All right, whatever. It's going to be another Ohio State win. We're not going to fool ourselves. Um, but then after having such a great season in 21 and then finally getting it done and accomplishing the goal of beating Ohio State again, and then the following year, even though the team ran the table again in the regular season, I still think there was, especially on the road, I think there were a lot of fans that were a little, we beat them last year, but they're still a very talented team and they're probably going to get us back. And I think a lot of fans, because I know I was very happily excited, but maybe surprised a little bit about how the way Michigan beat Ohio State last year. So now we come to a third time, and both teams, of course, the winner, are more than likely going to be in the playoffs. The way Iowa is looking at this point, another weak opponent in the Big Ten championship game. So it's all down to this. I don't know. Maybe it's possible the way things go. The loser could possibly still be in the playoffs because that's what happened last year with Ohio State getting in. I think Michigan, though, I think Ohio State has, most people would agree. Ohio State has the much better chance of getting into the playoffs if they lose. If Michigan loses, they're done. They're not going to the playoffs based on their schedule.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, right now, look at the way the rankings are. I mean, Ohio State is ranked ahead of Michigan, so they've got kind of more wiggle room, right? Like if they do lose. But you nailed it. I mean, the winner is going to go to the Big Ten title game, presumably win that, and they'll have an easy fast track into the playoff. The loser is going to need a lot of help, just because right now, I mean, if you're looking at the top 5 teams right now are all unbeaten. So like there's a lot of options here, and I don't think. I think it's less likely you're going to see a loser of this game, a one-loss loser of Michigan Ohio State getting in. Certainly plausible. I mean, if this game goes down to the wire, it's like a 2016 game where it goes to overtime and you lose by a couple of points, controversial call. You might have the committee might give you some mercy, but I mean, you got to win this game. It's simple as that. It's going to kind of determine Michigan's fate, right? Like before this season, Blake Corum and so many of the Michigan guys, players who decide to come back, they were talking national championship or bust, and this is kind of that next step in obviously in getting there. So it's a big game. You mentioned the point spread and everything else, and it's probably right about where I'd want it.
Yeah.
It's half a possession. Michigan's they're basically the odds makers are basically telling you this is an even game on a neutral
Yes.
playing field. Michigan's getting 3
As well it
points.
should be. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And it's ironic because this game hasn't been a one possession game since 2016. I mean, they've been blowouts either side since. So it's pretty remarkable. It wouldn't shock me if that ends up being the case again on Saturday, whether it's Ohio State winning or Michigan winning. So the line is about right where you expect it to be. Michigan's won the last 2 years, so I think they get the benefit of the doubt in that regard. But that's why they suited up, and that's why they're going to play the game.
All right, so we know the defense has lived up to expectations, maybe even more so with some of the key players they've lost over the last couple of years. But what's the offense still has a couple. I mean, they have 3 in that interior, especially, but they have 3 long-term, steady, solid players. But there's a couple of issues, of course, on the outside. That's really hurt them. Would you say that's their number one issue on the entire team this year has been outside on the offensive line?
Yeah, 100%. The tackles have been a rotating group ever since they got to Michigan, and it's important to point out they're all basically transfers. They've all come in, and this is kind of their first year, aside from Carson Barnhart, who's been here a while. And I think that was part of the issue early, right? Like the Ladarius Henderson, he came in from Arizona State, and then he didn't practice in the spring. He didn't come in until he didn't really start with the team until the summer.
Okay.
And then so you really had a group of guys who I think were used to practicing one another. So early on, early in the year, they had issues, you know, blocking for the run, and then it seems like as the season has gone on, it's almost it's flipped. Like I think, and we've seen it the last couple of games. They've really struggled in pass protection. That was one of the reasons why I think Michigan kind of abandoned it there against Penn State a couple of weeks ago. So they've had their issues. I mentioned Darius Henderson, Miles Hinton's the other transfer in from Stanford. They're solid players. They have a history and everything else, but I almost feel like Michigan's trying to fit like a round peg in a square hole. Like I mentioned Henderson. He was a former guard / tackle. I don't think Michigan necessarily knew what to do with him, and they kind of had to force him to play tackle just because they brought back both their guards this year. And then Hinton was another situation where another transfer where he came in late. He didn't participate in spring or summer, and then kind of he was thrown in the mix in fall camp. So they got behind. So it's been a mixed match group. They've looked good at times, and they've looked bad at others. But nonetheless, I think bottom line is here, this Michigan offensive line, I don't think is as good as it's been the last couple of years. And I'm not saying it's not to say it's bad, but it's certainly not. I think one of those elite lines maybe we expected it to be.
You know what's interesting is that when you take a look at the stats, it doesn't look like a whole lot's changed, like sacks allowed, turnovers, things like that. But I'm sure, and I haven't seen it. I'm sure there are stats out there that say it, but I bet you the percentage of how many times they drop back and pass, and how many times they do this, that, because it just seems like the passing game is off more, and like McCarthy's running for his life a little bit more, and so yeah, it seems like it's worse, but I believe that's probably got to be the case. But overall, what can happen? I know you at this point in the season, you should be what you are. I don't think anything's going to change. What do you expect is going to be the game plan? Is it just going to be what we've seen all year? Do you expect anything different? And because Ohio State's passing game as well, even though they've got Marvin Harrison and they've got really two elite receivers and a heck of a tight end and a heck of a running back, but still in the passing game specifically, it's not the same either because Stroud's gone. McCord has not been that phenom that maybe he will become, but he's a young kid. He's got to take some time to develop. So we might be looking at sort of like the result of what we've seen with Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan. Maybe we're going to get into like a 16-13, 20-17 type game.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I do think Michigan's going to try and run the football. As I mentioned, Sharon Moore, their offensive line coach and OC, is the head coach. So his identity is kind of running the football, and you saw that a couple of weeks ago against Penn State. They ran the football.
Yeah.
So I think they're going to try and do that. I don't know what the success rate is going to be, but I do think they want to put the football in their stars, their playmakers' hands. That's Blake Corum, that's Donovan Edwards, that's J.J. McCarthy with his legs. He's a bit of a question mark. He's playing on a bum ankle the last couple of weeks. He got injured against Penn State. They didn't use him a ton last Saturday against Maryland, like in terms of like running the football.
Okay.
And he didn't play particularly well either. So I think Michigan, if you go back in the history of this game, the last 10, 15 years, the team that wins this game rushes for more yards.
Yes.
So yeah, the storyline coming in is the winner in this game happens in the trenches. But if you go back even last year, I mean, Michigan didn't, if people forget, Blake Corum was injured. He tried to play early, didn't end up playing. And Michigan really used the threat of their run to set up the pass. And for 3.5 quarters, they took the lead and were winning that game because of the pass game. They kind of caught Ohio State off guard. And then at the end, Donovan Edwards busted a couple of big runs to kind of secure things. So, I mean, their identity is running the football. They're going to try and do that. But the difference with this Michigan offense this year is they can uncork the football. They can move it down the field. They like to use the tight ends, as has been the case during Jim Harbaugh's tenure. They have some playmakers at receiver that they didn't have maybe last year and the last couple of years, like a Roman Wilson. Cornelius Johnson had his moment. He had a big game in this game last year as well. So I'm looking at those guys to be heavily involved. I expect them to try and kind of incorporate all these people into the picture. because I don't think Michigan's going to win this game running exclusively. They're going to need to be able to do it and sustain those long, time consuming drives that keep the Ohio State offense off the field. And because, as you mentioned, they got a lot of playmakers. The attention isn't on Kyle McCord, their quarterback, but it seems like it's on everyone else. I mean, Ohio State made an effort this offseason to bulk up and be more physical in the trenches and be able to win that way. And they've got the playmakers at receiver to do it, just like we talk about Mekabuka, Marvin Harrison Jr., Cade Stover, the tight end's fantastic. So there are weapons there, but Kyle McCord's got to get it to them. So I think defensively for Michigan, the key is going to be getting pressure on McCord. You can't give him a ton of time to deliver the football. He's largely a statue. He doesn't move very well. He isn't like a Talia Tagovailoa, the Maryland quarterback
True.
who was giving Michigan fits in the past couple of years. So if they can get some pressure on him and force him to get rid of the football relatively quickly, he's more likely to make mistakes. And I think that's where Michigan capitalized with that defense has been so darn good this year.
Yeah, and what makes the defense go? Is there one particular player? Because it doesn't appear that way. I mean, they've had superstar guys the last couple of years, but this time around, and we talked about it in the beginning of the season, this is not a surprise. We talked about how this is more than likely going to be a committee deal. And yes, maybe you'll see Will Johnson step up to be one of the elite corners in the game, and I think that maybe that's been on track. But yeah, there's a lot of talent all the way across the board. Which guys do you think that they really need to rely on the most?
Yeah, I think they're going to need, as I was talking about, they're going to need to get pressure from the edge rushers. Guys like a Braden McGregor and Jalen Harrell and Derek Moore. Moore had a strip sack last week against Maryland, ended up scoring a touchdown, or excuse me, Michael Barrett had it, but Moore picked it up and ran it in for a touchdown. So you really hit the nail on the head with the committee thing. I mean, there aren't really any first round picks in this group. You've got a lot of guys, some guys that are very good. You got some linebackers like Junior Colson, probably potential All-American. He's playing banged up too, but it's just really guys that kind of play within the system. They're kind of a true bend don't break defense. They'll let teams move down the field occasionally, but they tend to they'll harden up as teams get closer to the red zone, and they like to force field goals over touchdowns. So as long as they play that way, just like they did last year, I think they'll be in decent shape. And the one thing we haven't really seen is, and I keep talking about this week in and week out this year, by this point last year, Michigan kind of had their back against the wall. They had it in some regards last week against Maryland, but it never really was there was never a question. Yeah, and they haven't
never
had
trailed.
that yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm waiting on that to happen. If Ohio State can score early and maybe get up a two score lead, I'm really curious to see how Michigan responds, because they've done a good job of kind of forcing turnovers when they needed it, and forcing other teams into mistakes. And that's been the kind of the calling card of this defense. Like you said, there are no super. Aiden Hutchinson is not on this team. David Ajabo is not on this team. There is no lockdown corner. Will Johnson's played well, but he started off the year injured again. So they got a lot of pieces, a lot of guys that can make plays, and I think you're going to need one or two of those to be successful.
What's the weakness on the defense, do you think? What are you concerned about the most?
It can't be the middle of the field, because they tend to play like so Michigan's played a lot more zone this year than previous years.
Okay.
They started to do it a couple of years ago, but it's been more and more, especially this year. So they've been prone to giving up 10 to 15 yard throws over the middle of the field to tight ends and slot guys and the like. So as I was saying, teams can move down the field. They've shown that they can, but then as they kind of get in the red zone or closer to the end zone, that Michigan
those zones they shrink. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And Michigan's DB's coach, Steve Klinkscale, he's an expert at the zone stuff. He did it at Kentucky before he came to Michigan. So that's kind of what they've leaned on especially the last year. I don't know. I think Ohio State will probably, turn out some yards. They'll move the football, but it's gonna come down to whether Michigan keep them out of the end zone and force them to attempt a field goal.
Do they play? Will Johnson be on Marvin Harrison Jr. most of the day?
It's a good question, and that's my guess. It wouldn't surprise me if Michigan they've made it an effort, especially the last 3 or 4 games, use more 5 and 6 man backfields. So my guess is it will be Will Johnson, and they'll probably double him with like a Mikey Sanders still, one of the nickels,
Wow.
to keep
That'd be
him
a hell
out.
of a double team.
Yeah, it would. And Sanders still's played really well. I mean, he had
Oh
two
yeah.
interceptions against Maryland. He came up. I mean, he had a big play last year against Ohio State too. So my guess is they're going to give him extra focus. But then you got Abuka. You got to worry
Yep.
about too on the other side. And their other corner, Josh Wallace, transferred from UMass. He's been hit or miss this year.
Okay.
He's had some good moments early in the year, but he hasn't really played big boy. This was his first year playing big boy football. I mean, he came from UMass, and where they were a exclusively man defense, and
Okay.
that's kind of what he grew up playing, and that's what he kind of became accustomed to. So in a way, I think he's learned a little bit this year too with the zone scheme. And look, he's gotten targeted before in the last couple games. Teams have targeted him, Penn State especially. So I wouldn't surprise me if Ohio State tries to do the same.
Kicking game. We know how clutch it was over the last few years. This year with the changes, how's the kicking game been, and how confident should the fans feel? How do you think they're going to feel if they need a big kick? And I'm not talking about the end of the game. In this game, there could be a lot of big kicks or big punts that need to happen even in the first half. So, how confident should or do you think in general the fans are going to be with the kicking game?
In terms of like field goal kicking, I don't know how much. There isn't a ton of confidence there. For one thing, obviously Jake Moody's no longer there, and he was probably the best kicker Michigan's ever had. So it's hard to top that. But
Yeah.
the guy that got in this year, James Turner, a transfer from Louisville, he's been solid. He's pretty reliable within 40 yards.
Okay.
But Michigan hasn't really tested him beyond that.
Okay.
And maybe a couple of times, but it wasn't like a Moody situation where they felt like if they got within the 40, 45-yard line, they were guaranteed 3 points. That's not necessarily the case. I found Michigan's offense this year to be a little bit more aggressive, especially in fourth and short situations on the other side.
Go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, they're more likely to go for it than try a long field goal. I guess is
Okay.
what I'm trying to say. Punting situation, Tommy Doman's he's gotten better. Season has gone on, and he's a guy too. Just hasn't had a ton of opportunities because Michigan's offense has been pretty good this year. They've done a good job of scoring. So he had a big punt against Maryland last week. He pinned him inside, I think, the 2 yard line there in the fourth quarter, and it really kind of helped flipped field position and kind of helped Michigan, stave off Maryland. So Doman's been solid. Not a Brad Robbins who Michigan had last year, NFL caliber punter, but he's done the job. And James Turner again has done pretty much everything Michigan's asked him to do, but they're not asking him to go out there and boot 50-yarders. That's just not what they're looking to do.
All right, a couple more things before I let you go. Injuries. Will there be anybody that will not or may not play any key guys?
Yeah, so Michigan was for maybe the first time all season. They had several guys leave last week's game against Maryland injured. It became a running joke in the press box because we'd be watching games this year, and opponents would have players fall down, during the game and have to be helped off, and Michigan didn't have it. But they had several guys last Saturday come off. Most notably, Roman Wilson, the receiver.
Yep.
He took a big hit after a 23-yard catch. I don't know if it was a concussion, but it looked like it. He was taken out, didn't return to the game. We were told yesterday he is going to play. He's good to go. So that'll be key for Michigan's their passing game. And then the offensive line's been banged up. I mentioned Darius Henderson, the tackle. He did not play last week. I was under the presumption that it was temporary. It was precautionary that they expect to have him back Saturday. I don't know what the injury is, though, and we don't know how serious it is, but he's going to try and suit up. Miles Hinton, the other tackle who played Saturday, he came out of the game, had to be helped off. It was a knee injury. Sounds like it wasn't anything super serious, but I got to think it's going to affect him in some way Saturday. So my guess is those three guys will try and suit up. They're going to play. To what degree they're going to be, I don't know. But Michigan's going to try and give it a go. The good thing about Michigan, and something they've been trumpeting all season long, right? The depth of the offensive line.
Okay.
When Hinton and Henderson did not play on Saturday, they brought in Trente Jones at tackle. Another guy who's been around the program a while, a borderline starter.
Okay.
They've used him in like 6-man bunch formations. If either one of those guys can't play or they're injured or they get injured in the game, he'll fill in for him.
And as you said, so he's a hometown kid. So
yeah,
are there any other younger players that may have to step up that have played a little bit that the team just doesn't know how they'll perform given the opportunity?
Yeah, there's one guy that's coming to mind that they've kind of sprinkled in this season. He's gotten more of an more put on his plate as a thing. Samaj Morgan, receiver.
Oh yeah.
He's had some moments this year. He's a speedy guy. They've been using him a lot of like the jet sweeps, end arounds.
Yes.
He could be a playmaker to watch. Someone who's kind of flies under the radar you wouldn't expect, especially breaking a big play. He's got explosive speed, and he can break a 40, 50 yard catch if they get him in the right spot. So it's possible that he sees something on Saturday.
And is he a true freshman?
Yes. Yep.
And would he be considered the top true freshman on the team,
Yeah, I would say
production
so.
wise, this year?
I'm racking my brain right now, and I can't think of anyone else. I mean,
Okay.
this is a really experienced, team on both sides of the ball. So and especially Jim Harbaugh. He's not big on playing true freshmen. He will when he has to or on occasion, but they prefer to like redshirt these guys and kind of wean them in, so to speak. But Morgan impressed. I mean, Michigan got a quartet of freshman receivers in the offseason. They were talking up. Obviously, Morgan was one of them, and he's gotten opportunity. He's flourished since he's gotten the football.
Well, it should be like you said at the beginning. It should be interesting because even though Michigan had the big win last year, Corum, Wilson. I mean, these are big guys that were not part of it. And we talked last year about how much they really missed Wilson for most of the season, and this is why we saw how much they could have even used him last year. So he needs to stay healthy, no doubt about that. But I'm going to leave you with JJ. And this is the reason why I think if Michigan wins the game, this is how they have to win it because they have the experienced quarterback. They've got the quarterback that is about to be, a draft pick. Could be first round, second round, who knows? But he's going to be a high draft pick. And the other kid on the other side is a very young kid that just has not had the big game. He hasn't had like the big 300-yard, 5-touchdown game in a big spot. Maybe it'll come. Maybe it'll never come. We don't know. It's still too early in his career. So far, so far so good. As far as I'm sure most fans at Ohio State believe, because he hasn't lost yet. But that's where Michigan has to make sure they take that advantage as best they can because it's football, and if you have an advantage at quarterback, that's very important.
Yeah, you nailed it. And I said this before the season, and I think I said it to you in our preseason deal. But I said JJ Michigan would go as far as JJ McCarthy took them. With his talent, his arm ability, he can get out. He's not the most mobile guy in the world, but he can pick up yards when you need him, and he has no problem doing it. He knows no problem taking a big hit. So this really needs to be his game. He's got to come out and have the game of his career, not make mistakes, not force stuff. Because that's really been his problem all season. If there's one issue, criticism of JJ McCarthy, sometimes he'll force a pass, and sometimes it gets him in trouble. He can't do that. He can't turn the ball over. He can't make it. He can't make mistakes. Can't fumble the ball. It's his game. If he is relatively healthy and can move and make those throws, he's not in the Heisman race anymore, but this would be his moment. Like this would be an opportunity for him to show the world, with everyone watching, NFL scouts included, that he can be that generational quarterback that Jim Harbaugh likes to call him.
Yeah, because there's going to be a handful of times, at least in this game, that he is going to be pressured. That's just the way it's gone this year for this team. And again, if he's not 100%, how does he react to the pressure? And that's going to be very, very big because they're not going to be able to run the football the way they did against Penn State. They got to throw the football to beat Ohio State, and they've got the weapons, especially at tight end. I don't think there's a team maybe in college football that has the talent. I mean, Iowa might have, but those guys are hurt. So right now, Michigan might have the best group of tight ends in the nation, and they know how to take advantage of it. I'm sure they will. So. We'll see how it goes. It's again, like I said, Ohio State, better chance to get in if they lose, but this is it for Michigan. There's just no doubt about it. Win, and you're more than likely in the playoffs again. And then I would, of course, look forward to talking to you again to preview the playoffs. Lose, and then we'll be talking about the bowl, and then we'll be talking about Jim Harbaugh, and that'll definitely speed that process up considerably if they lose this game on Saturday. So, and by the way, would Marone, would he be the coach, head coach? You think? Did they give it to him?
Yeah, he would be in front of the line. You wonder what the NCAA investigation is going to yield. I don't know if the coordinators will get slapped with any penalties. If not, yeah, I think he would be in front of the line. It'd be him. Jesse Minter would be up there. Mike Hart, Michigan alum, would probably be considered. And you wonder too if Jim was to leave for the NFL, would he take some of these guys with him? For his staff. I don't know.
True.
So, but yeah, I gotta think more would be
So
probably.
Sharon Moore, definitely more than likely, especially since he's been given this opportunity. I mean, there's a reason he's the head coach right now, is because he's the guy they trust the most, and so far so good. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that goes. Again, I'm not the biggest fan, or I'm not very confident in how that goes. A lot of times, it doesn't usually go very smoothly when you have a legend and you just hand it off to an assistant who doesn't have head coaching experience, but we'll get down that road when it happens, or if it happens this season. First things first, take care of Ohio State, and we can talk about all that. You're going to be at the game. You're also going to be talking about the game. Again, we're going to have the links in the description of where you can find the articles and the videos. What's up next between now and then regarding podcasts for you?
Yeah, we're so all our written stuff's at mlive.com/Wolverines, and we have the Wolverine Confidential podcast 2 times a week usually. We'll have the pre-Ohio State podcast up probably Thursday or Friday. You can get it, Apple, Spotify, anywhere you listen.
Excellent. And then do you have like an immediate post game?
Yeah, we'll do one Sunday, probably Sunday afternoon. We usually don't do it immediately just because we're pumping out, content left and right, and written stuff. But it'll come out Sunday.
Aaron, appreciate it. Know how busy you are, and like I said, I hope we definitely get the opportunity to talk in the next couple of weeks, and then we'll have a whole month to preview the playoff. Hopefully, the playoff game if they can get there.
Yeah, looking forward to it. I want to cover the Rose Bowl. That's always been my goal, so I'm hoping they.
That's another sweet little deal there, isn't it? The Rose Bowl. That makes it that much more special. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. All right, Aaron. Appreciate it as always. Good luck at the game covering it, and we'll talk to you hopefully sometime soon.
Yep. Thanks, Greg.